Let me first of all thank you for having me. In the end, politics is really about who you talk to and talk for, and I consider myself an entrepreneur come to Parliament and politics. The problem is there aren't that many of us in Parliament, Whitehall and politics, and it's really important that we get out. As a minister, they don't let you out much, and they certainly don't let you out to talk freely to audiences like this, of insurgent, disrespectful, tomorrow backing, bureaucracy busting, citizen empowering, change accelerating investors. Well, I relish it because I think what you're doing and what this sector, particularly here in the UK and London, is doing is, as Tim just said, actually empowering citizens, driving a new zeitgeist of 21st century citizenship in which people can click and get what they want, challenging for government because people expect to be able to click and get what they want, and we haven't modernised public services. But I think ultimately we're living through a period of phenomenal empowerment of people, whoever you are and wherever you are, driven in large part by technology. Well, boy, do we need that. We need it in government, and we need it more quickly across the world. So I consider you part of my constituency. I know you didn't elect me, and I know I was elected by the people of Mid-Norfolk. But good politics involves lots of constituencies, and we need people in Parliament who speak for you and to you. So thank you for the chance, but also for the incredible stuff that you're doing. I've been watching on Twitter today, and the insights that you're sharing and the horizons that you're pointing to around artificial intelligence, around online technology, around where this technology revolution goes next is incredibly exciting. You can't fail but be excited by it. Civil servants can be terrified by it, but that is our problem in government to deal with. And lastly, thank you for the companies you're creating. I, like many Conservatives, spend our time in Parliament trying to remind everyone that every pound we spend on hospitals, on schools, on all the things we want to do has to be earned first, and it has to be earned by businesses first. You'd be amazed how many people in Parliament don't actually understand that. They think there is a thing called government money. I keep having to explain there's no such thing as government money. There's money which is created by companies paying tax, employing people, paying tax, buying things, paying tax. We collect it, manoeuvre it around Whitehall, redistribute it, give it down to people to spend on behalf of government. And it's the money and the prosperity that your companies create that we need. It's much more than that. I think that what this sector does, and the reason I loved my 15 years in it, is it gives people hope, it gives people empowerment, it gives people a sense that they can take control of their own destiny, whether in the individual click or the individual service or product that you develop, or, as I came to experience it, in the incredible opportunity and sense of purpose that comes from team-based ventures. I think there is nothing more exciting than venture capital. A small group of people with a really big idea, raising some money to go and change the world. That's why I went into politics. I'm going to say something to you in a minute about why I think we need a more venture-based approach to politics. I'm going to share with you a couple of insights about what I've seen, the midlife crisis that I've had from venture capital to government. I'm going to give you a venture capitalist's appraisal of the United Kingdom as a business and set out some thoughts on where I think this crisis, for that is what we are in at the moment, represents an incredible opportunity for us, and we have to seize it. I think we're in something of a last chance saloon. I relish that because there's no more time for half talk, half truths, woolly words. We need to really grip it, and in the gripping of it, I think, is something quite exciting. And the spirit that you show in your companies demonstrates that. And I think if Britain was run a bit more like a venture, not a venture capital firm, I have some problems with that. I know they've got better than when I worked in them, but like a venture with that same sense of all for one, common purpose, flat structured, driven by the end goal, I think we'd be an incredibly successful company, and I think we can and should and still have that chance to do that. Let me just first of all say I was not a fantastic venture capitalist. You can tell that because my suit isn't very well ironed, my clothes are slightly shabby. I tell my son it's shabby chic, he just says it's shabby. And I hugely respect those people who have managed to do it. I was Cambridge and London-based, but we worked all around the country. I was mainly in bioscience and a bit of clean tech and a little bit of energy tech as well. And when I came to government in 2010, my message to David Cameron and George Osborne and the coalition was, look, if we are going to get out of debt and get this economy moving, of course we need to be careful with public spending, but we've got to really drive growth. That's how you get this country off the addiction to debt. Grow the cake, and then the government debt will be a smaller slice of it, and we can spread more prosperity. And I think we've done quite a load of some good things in coalition, and some good things in the beginning of that Cameron administration before the referendum. But it's clear to me that people in this country, the reason for the Corbyn surge is that people are weary and depressed by the prospect of another 7 years of ongoing government austerity, which is really below inflation, ring fencing of public spending, some cuts in some departments, and a sense that the harder you work, it doesn't matter because you're not going to get anything extra for it. That is profoundly debilitating and profoundly depressing, and I think the British people need a different message. And I'll say something about that at the end. Let me just reflect on one or two lessons I learned in venture capital and one or two lessons I learned in government. Firstly, in venture capital, never believe your own IRR predictions on your investor presentations. You'll look at somebody who, I was involved in a team in 1997. We raised our first fund, a £40 million fund, and the IRR target was 75%. Well, it tells you something about how toppy the market was. The truth was we created 9 really interesting life science companies in 3 years. We were going some. We were putting 3 million in pretty much at the first dinner and 6 million in 2 years later. But I learned something, which is that in order to really be able to take that money and turn it into value, actually it's not that technology isn't the limiting factor, really. It's the pace of the people and the caliber of the people and the quality of your board, and whether you can build a little company that's got the scale, the breadth, the capacity, the people to move at speed and to swallow money at pace and to create value at pace. Secondly, I learned very basic maths, that 8% compounded interest over 10 years is 100%. That's when I realized that the value of my carried interest wasn't going to be everything I thought it was. And I also learned this, that in the private sector, the time cost of money is everything. And that takes me to government, because in government, we have the opposite. We have never enough money and all the time in the world. Government's traditional response to a problem is, we haven't got enough money, we'll kick it into the long grass for a bit. And I think that is a profound mismatch and imbalance that's got to be tackled. And the frustration I felt as a minister for life science in the Department of Health and Business with officials who simply literally didn't understand. They're not stupid people. They're some of the cleverest people I know, but they've never lived the reality of the time cost of money. We've borrowed this money from someone else to make it sweat for them and for us, and we have to create value. And that pressure, I think, is one that actually we all feel. It's in the whole economy. We're borrowing 1.7 trillion. The whole country should be feeling like that. But in the public sector, that is not one of the rules. It's not one of the things you're taught at civil service college. And I think one of the things we need to do is get much greater secondment and job swapping at the very highest level when you get to sort of grade 6 or 7. If some of my civil servants had worked in a biotech venture or in a pharma company, they would have come back with a much greater sense of the urgency of the sector and why urgency is so important. Equally, I think quite a lot of you would have come away and said, have you any idea? I now understand why civil servants, why Whitehall works the way it does. I think it would be a powerful and empowering and useful thing that would help drive what we need. Let me share 2 or 3 things with you from government. Firstly, has anyone read Yes, Minister? Yeah, Tim has, of course. Well, I got news for you. It is very, very funny, but it is not a comedy. It is an operating manual. It is how government works. I literally used to come home from a day in the office as a minister, bewildered by what I'd experienced, turned to chapter 5, and there it was, absolutely all of it. Everything that had happened to me had been described by those 2 in that book. So if you want to get an insight into ministerial and governmental life, it's seriously funny and very much worth reading. More seriously, here are some insights on some of the problems we face. In Whitehall, the culture basically in the departments, the success metric, all of you share similar success metrics really, which is value, value for money, speed of return. The success metric in Whitehall is power. That equates to, have we got big legislation? Have we got more money from the Treasury? Are we winning in the cabinet battles? And is our department on the up? Is it getting bigger? Has it got more to do? Are we getting the best people? Are we getting the most attention from number 10? That's the basic metric that drives Whitehall. It's worth just thinking about that for a minute. The metric isn't, are we delivering more for less? Are we helping to take the money we were given by the Treasury last year and achieve the same things for less? And that culture goes right the way down through the public sector. There's a cancer, in my view, at the heart of public sector finances, which is this. If you do deliver more for less, if you run a hospital and deliver the same clinical outcomes for less money, or take the same money and deliver more for it than other hospitals, do you know what we do in government? We give you less. Literally, we give you less. People in the Treasury or the department say, oh, well, you obviously didn't need what we gave you last year, so we'll give you less, and this lot have obviously got some really difficult problems, so we'll give them more. Is it any wonder that productivity in the public sector is so low? I often say to private sector audiences, the genius of the private sector is that it produces more or less consistently 2.5% productivity gains every year. This is not because you're all, I mean, obviously you are, you're not geniuses, obviously you are. The genius is in the system, that basically if you deliver more for less, you get more power, you get promoted, you take over the division, you take over the next division, eventually you run the company. That's not how the public sector works, and one of my passions is we need to change that round. We will never drive a proper innovation economy if Whitehall is running on very old-fashioned rules and old-fashioned models of funding. And I'll come to my venture capitalist appraisal of the UK, but we're essentially running a very asset-rich business on incredibly tight P&L. And the whole of government is obsessed with the P&L. But the real key to growth and the key to morale and the key to spirit and the key to getting out of this problem, I would argue, is on the balance sheet of Britain. It's not on the P&L. And we need a new type of balance sheet economics, venture economics, that looks at British balance sheet and asks, how can we get it moving? And I'll just give you one last story to horrify you from my brief time in government. The comprehensive spending review, every 3 years, big moment, the whole of government has to go to the Treasury and set out every department what it needs for the next 3 years. It used to be done annually, if you can believe it. 3 years now, that's the longest term planning horizon financially. So I'm a Minister for Health and Business with a joined-up mission as the first Minister for Life Science to make sure that our health economy, the billion we spend on the MRC, the billion we spend on the National Institute of Health Research, the billion we spend here and there, is actually driving our economy, and the Department of Business, working with the life science sector, are making that money work for the UK. So you would think that I would be able to look at both budgets in both departments. Now, you'd be wrong. In fact, I don't get to look at either, because in the eyes of the civil servants, I'm compromised, because I've got a foot in the enemy camp. Just reflect on that for a minute. So there I was saying, listen, what I want to go and bat in the Treasury for this sector, and I want to show that the billion we put into the Medical Research Council, the billion we put into the National Institute for Health Research, and the money we put into the biomedical catalyst, I want to put all that on a spreadsheet. I am still, yes, a venture capitalist. I want to put it on a spreadsheet, and I want to show what growth we get from it and what inward investment we get from it. 6 billion inward investment in the last 5 years, 5 billion of exports, and I want a net present value. And I want to show how we could use that investment to drive greater growth. Well, you can't even begin to do it if you haven't got the numbers and if the two departments won't actually come together. So when I talk about a more business-like approach to government, that's what I mean. We don't just need a government for business, and boy, do we, but I think we need a more business-like government as well. And the traditional refrain goes up from some of my colleagues, yeah, George, this is great, but civil servants can't do this. Essentially. That's the same attitude that said in the 80s, you know, poor people couldn't handle a mortgage. They wouldn't know how to do that. Well, they pretty soon got the hang of it. I think civil servants will pretty soon get the hang. It's basic stuff. If you run a good division, if you sweat it, make it achieve more, and I'm not talking about privatisation. I'm talking about, for example, NICE, the National Institute of Clinical Excellence, for which I was the minister. I said to them in their annual review, listen, I know this hasn't come from number 10 or the Treasury, but take it from me. Over the next 5 years, you're not going to have enough money. So I think you need to be globalizing your service, digitalizing it. I think we should have nice protocols, your health economic protocols. You should offer the service to other countries. You should be training the health economists of tomorrow. Aim to generate all your costs in the next 10 years from that commercialization. It's perfectly common sense. We can't do that, Minister. Oh, why not? Well, it's not in our articles. Well, they're probably right, it's not in their articles, but that's not the point, and you get my point. We've got incredible organisations on the balance sheet of the UK in global markets that could establish so much more and could generate so much more, and we've got people around the world who need training. Our public sector could be a great generator of income and revenue. Let me just then briefly give you my venture capitalists' assessment of the UK PLC. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Strengths, incredible brand. Number one soft power. Great Britain, the flag flutters, the world salutes. We are the number one soft power nation in the world, number two on the Olympic table. The world spots things like British armed forces, aid, defence, Glaxo, science stops an Ebola outbreak. We just brush over it here. It's a big thing. Britain around the world means something to people who are hopeless. People tonight in shanty towns look at the British flag and they see in it, more than we've started to see in it, they see in it hope and integrity and belief and investment and innovation and creativity, all the things they aspire to. That is an incredible brand. I'd invest in Britain just on that alone. But I could list other things. Incredible science, a phenomenal powerhouse of city expertise. We're a global financial powerhouse, and we're a science and innovation powerhouse. We don't connect the two together well enough, and that's in the weaknesses, but those are both incredible strengths. Our culture is quite extraordinary. What other country could come up with an Olympic opening ceremony like us? Well, I know it was funny, but that's the point. It was funny, it was inspiring, it was innovative, we are an incredibly creative nation. We also have incredible universities, and we have some really profound strengths in our economy. Very, very high rates of internet penetration, high rates of digitalization, and this potentially very strong asset base in terms of the public sector's ability to procure and support private sector innovation. Other countries around the world wish they had something like an NHS. They don't know that it isn't perfect, but people aspire to having that level of governmental security and expertise we have. Weaknesses are pretty clear. We have phenomenal debt and deficit. I mean, I say phenomenal. Debt is only really as big as how fast you grow the economy. But at the moment, we're carrying about 1.7 trillion of debt. A chunk of that was from bailing out the banks. Another chunk was inherited from Liam Byrne, who thought it was funny, and our failure over the last few years to grow the economy fast enough while the costs of delivering public services increase. And we're still running a deficit. We've got it down about 75%. But every year, we spend more than we earn. Every year. I call the structural deficit the bonfire in the basement of the British economy. As we grow the economy, a big skyscraper, fantastic thing, generating income. In the basement, there's a bonfire. It's driven by four things. Health, costs are exploding. Welfare, which we capped off very painfully. We haven't reduced them, we've just capped off the rate of increase. Pensions, public sector pensions, we've capped off the rate of interest. We're very unpopular with a lot of people who are having to work harder. The killer is debt interest. It's currently about 0.0%. But if interest rates go up, we start to pay a very big price for that debt. That's a big weakness if I was investing, and you'd want to grow it. So the question you want to ask is, well, can we grow this company so that that debt becomes proportionate and manageable? And I think the other weakness would be political instability right now. I wish that wasn't the case, but if I was being honest, I'd say, Jeremy Corbyn is knocking at the door, and you've got to hope that people like me and others who get innovation and who get the importance of this challenge can win this debate with the British public. Opportunities. I think this is where it gets really exciting. Emerging markets. I have some doubts about Brexit. I have a doubt that it's going to be the great nirvana that solves all problems. But one of the things I am excited about is those individual trade deals. We're no longer tied into Europe signing trade deals with the emerging economies. We can have our own. And I think there's some incredible opportunities for us to export our clean tech, our agri-tech, our digital technologies out into those emerging markets, particularly given that historic brand. Technology, the incredible pace of technology that's changing society, so much of it the deep creativity and the deep science is here. This country punches well above its weight. A huge opportunity in our public services to support innovation, and I've talked a little bit about it. I'll give you two really big examples. In genomics, I was Minister for Life Science. Genomics, the study of how genetics changes your response to drugs and your predisposition to disease, is transforming medicine. We're not far away from being able to do an individualized cancer therapy, individualized for the patient, for affordable prices. That's individualized drugs designed for you, not you, and you, not individual drugs. And it's incredible. Genomics is totally transforming the industry. The NHS is now, because of our leadership in creating Genomics England, harnessing all of its genomic information into one organisation, which I set up as a company, not a quango, called Genomics England Limited. And there's an incredible opportunity for it to connect around the world with industry, not to sell one genome, not to sell any individual data, but to allow companies to plug and play, create algorithms, create insights, and license so that we get revenues back, which I would put into paying for molecular diagnostics and genomic drugs in the NHS. And we could do that in so many other areas as well. The Oxford to Cambridge Railway, some of you may not have heard of, we've decided, I've been involved in the project, we're not just going to franchise out a sort of dad's army chuff-chuff that runs between Oxford and Cambridge. We're going to create the first Victorian railway company. It'll be a development company that has planning permission and development rights. And we want it to be a company that launches proper advanced train technology with a venture capital fund, external investment, and users being able to have a stake in the train company. So we're determined to try and use new models to harness technology and innovation and growth. Imagine if you could get from London to Oxford to Cambridge in one day on a fast train with 5G, good coffee. We could do for that whole triangle what the electrification of the Cambridge line did for the Cambridge economy. So there's some real opportunities in the UK in what we're doing and spending. And the threats, I think, are very obvious. Debt, political instability, and I think a weariness of spirit that this country's best days are not ahead of it, they're actually behind, and that anyone with any get up and go should probably do just that. That's what terrifies me. And I put it to you, I don't want to be too stark about it, but I think we're at a real moment in the story of this great nation. Will we, in 30 years, be telling our children, you had to be there? It was an incredible moment. We woke up and smelt the coffee off the back of the crash. We got off the lazy crack cocaine of easy debt, consumer credit, a housing booming, a house and retail boom, which we thought was growth but wasn't really. It was pretty turbulent. We came out of the European Union. We really confronted our problems. We stopped blaming others. We gripped our assets. We unleashed a global cycle of growth where we took our innovation out to the emerging markets. We embraced new development partnerships with some of the areas of the world where we had our longest post-colonial history. And we used our aid, our trade, and our security. We attracted big inward investment into our science base, and we globalized our technology. And over the next 30, 40 years, we became another a wealthy nation again, and a prosperous nation, and a nation full of hope. Or is this the moment where people say, finally Britain lost it, we pulled out of Europe, turned in on ourselves, cancelled the aid budget, shut down the army, and became an old people's home off the coast of Europe? A low-wage, low-service economy where the ultra-rich live in protected, gated communities and the rest in depression. I've painted a very bold and frightening picture to try and heighten, but I think that is some of what's going on. So for me, this debate about what we've learned in this election and what we need to do is a moment to smell the coffee, and I think you're seeing it. Philip Hammond's speech today was along this theme. Here are three things I think we should put right at the heart of a model for economic renewal and national renewal. One, those emerging markets. We talk a lot about post-Brexit, we'll be able to connect with them. But actually, weirdly, this country, I think, not you, you're part of the global success story of Britain, but the people I represent in my constituency are actually less global. These markets feel a million miles away. Cambridge, frankly, from mid-Norfolk feels 100 years away. I meet people who did their national service in the 50s, and they were more global. They traveled around the world. They knew where places were. We have to re-globalize as a nation. I'd like every school and college leaver to go and do a month working on a DFID program and see and experience the reality of life in the emerging markets. We've got to globalize culturally as well as financially, but we've got to make it easier for our emerging companies to get out into those global markets. One of the reasons in life science we've struggled to build at scale is In America, if you have a good idea, you can quickly get into 40 hospitals, 50 hospitals, go nationwide. Here, if it's any good, you have to go to America, and we tend to lose them. So we've got to plug into those emerging markets. I'd like a new approach of offering a much more joined-up aid, trade, and security package to some emerging economies. Take East Africa. Take Kenya. We actually built the original motorways, the churches, the roads, the schools. We have a big aid program. We have forces training at Archer's Post. And we own most of it's British capital that owns most of the safari and the soft fruit and the farming businesses. But guess what? It's China building the motorways and the railways. It's China turning a blind eye to Al-Qaeda in the north, and it's China sponsoring the poaching. Well, why don't we offer a proper development package? We'll put a destroyer offshore, we'll tackle the poaching. It'll be Wimpy and McAlpine that help to build the roads, and we will support you in your development task properly. We'll give you quick access to our technologies, and we'll help you become a more prosperous nation. I think it would be an inspiring moral message, and it would be one that galvanizes our emerging markets for your companies as well. Secondly, I think we have to have a new crusade for public sector innovation. I'd like a staff college for our great public sector innovators. I'd like our best hospital managers to be like 3-star generals, 3 pips, and if you've got them, we back them, we finance them. They don't have to go through all the same tests of everyone else. They can take over failing hospitals. Same with head teachers. If a head teacher turns around a failing school, they do this country the most incredible service. And they don't want Porsches. They just want recognition, and they want to be allowed to do it again and again. Our public servants are incredible people. We should back them and really support them. It's in all of our interests. And thirdly, I think we've got to get a Brexit that works for business. I suspect most of you probably are reconciled to the fact we're leaving the European political union. What you want to know is you can recruit the best people, you can get talent, you can build companies that can access the European market on sensible terms. In the end, I think it's about money, markets, and movement. And we need an approach to Brexit that's less ideological, less like a tribal battle in the Tory party, and more like a business plan for Britain for the 21st century. I've decided this week to break cover and to say some of this because I think it needs saying. I'm 50 and a sort of failed venture capitalist looking at this incredible company and thinking, isn't this the moment we could really do the management buyout? We could really turn it around. I'm old enough to remember Tesco's when it was a shoddy business. Literally, my mum used to say, oh, I wouldn't go to Tesco's. I mean, can you imagine that now? It was terrible. There's sort of litter everywhere and empty boxes and demoralised staff. And I saw it turn around in about 5 years. Incredible what we can do as a country. Look at our Olympic team. We used to be, 26th in the league table. Now we're second. Incredible leadership. I think this country's got it, and it wants to be allowed to do it. And I think the culture you create in your companies has got that spirit. And that's why I think we also need, thirdly, to back enterprise. I'd like a new deal for entrepreneurs. If you start a company, if you're growing fast, employing people, we want government off your back. And we'll come and talk to you when you've got to year 3 or 4 and employing 50 and say, now we need to talk about tax. I've done it, and I used to worry far too much about VAT, national insurance, compliance. You're the heroes building prosperity. We should help you. And I think you wouldn't mind paying the tax when you've built the business. So there are some thoughts on what we need to do. Most of all, we need to stiffen your pencil and encourage your risk-taking and support you and signal in government that we're behind you. Because I think what you're doing is one of the most positive things in this country. I've never known Britain so tired, fearful, depressed, and worried. And I think what you're doing gives people such hope. So all power to you, thank you. And I hope you know that you've got a friend on the dark side. Thank you.
Do you mind taking your question? No. No, fantastic. Fantastic. Can we have the gentleman there, hand shot up instantly?
Hi, thank you for the talk. It was great. When you talk about the civil service, you say that they focus on power as a KPI rather than business returns. However, when you talk about Brexit, you talk about a power KPI, taking back control. Can you give us an example of a financial metric whereby your emerging markets, innovation exports, actually offset giving your back on the biggest trading partner we currently have?
It's a great question. I don't actually talk about taking back control. Others do. That's why I made that call for a more business-based approach to Brexit. I do think potentially there is a sort of soft dividend, perhaps, of Britain finally taking some responsibility and stopping blaming others. But I honestly think that the Brexit deal needs to have some KPIs around it. Now, I don't think it's a very good negotiating tactic to share them publicly with the people we're going to negotiate with. But I do think it would be a good idea if we started in Parliament and in business and with business to have a conversation about where the payoffs are. I mean, it seems to me clear that the British public are very clear that they no longer trust southern France, Greece, Italy, Spain to police British borders. And I can sort of see where they're coming from. We were out of Schengen, so we were already, but that's a nicety. The British public have decided that this model of large-scale mass immigration with entitlement to all the benefits of citizenship on arrival in an age where there are 50 million people on the move, and a lot of them in the Mediterranean, is not sustainable. So we've got to find a way for the businesses of this country to be able to get the right skills that you need at an appropriately frictionless cost. But in the end, it's a metric, isn't it? It's going to be, you will make a judgment when this is done, I assume. Look, actually, we can make this work very well. We can access the markets that we need, we can access the people that we need, and the costs are perfectly feasible. It works. And personally, I felt we'd achieved that status with the position that we got to where John Major and David Cameron's negotiations, we were in the economic club, had a table at the political club, but not subject to its political rules. I thought that was an exquisitely British deal that we managed to get ourselves, but we didn't sell it properly to the British people, so we now have to find a new relationship. And I think the big advantage will be those international markets. And that's the thing that other countries can't do. France can't go and sign a trade agreement with the Philippines. I was trade envoy in the Philippines. I can tell you, they love this country and they would love to sign a trade deal with us. I was a Remainer, but I think there is an opportunity to go and do something very special here. You're shaking your head, I understand. It may not suit you or your business. And I'm not suggesting this is perfect. I was a Remainer, as I say, but I think we need to grip it. And I think if we grip those markets in a spirit of positive ambition, we may be surprised what we can achieve.
There's one more over here.
Thank you very much, George. I run a software company. We're exporting to South Africa. We're selling to Hong Kong and Singapore. I don't get it, but what is it with these trade agreements? I'm being a bit thick here, I guess. What's currently not possible?
Well, I don't know your sector.
Software.
Software, yeah. Well, I don't know your sector, but I can tell you, for example, in the Philippines, where I was trade envoy, we don't have any trade agreement with the Philippines at all. Now, they have trade agreements with other countries, which give preferential access to various markets. They've reduced trade barriers and tariffs to other countries. They have one with America. They haven't got one with China. China wants to have a trade agreement with them. And in addition to just a pure trade agreement, that's why I talk about a development partnership. If you look at the Philippines economy, when I went there as trade envoy, the civil service said to me, "Now, they won't be interested in your technology, Minister. This is primary economy. They want concrete, roads, dams, schools, and typhoon relief." When I got to the Philippines, what did the 10 biggest companies, family-owned companies, really want? What they said to me was, "God, we would love to have a trade agreement with you where we could work with you on developing clean tech, agri-tech, biotech. We'd like to have software institutes here. We'd like to have training facilities. We'd love to have a deeper and richer trading agreement with your nation." I think it could be incredibly valuable. I know the Philippines because I was trade envoy there. I don't know software in South Africa as well, but I think the principle may not be everywhere, but I think there are some places in the world where you'd look back in 10, 20 years and say, I tell you what, that trade agreement and that development partnership has driven a much deeper relationship and a deeper cultural relationship and huge trade flows off the back of it.
And if there's one more, I'll take one more question. Short, sharp question, short, sharp answer. There, sir. Possibly the most inconvenient place from the point of view of the microphone, but we'll play.
Short, sharp question. Who will be PM in 3 months?
Theresa May.
Okay. Right. Related, first of all, can I thank George very much? I told you he's spectacularly honest, spectacularly knowledgeable, and spectacularly charming, and as he has proved. And can I issue a polite instruction to the BVCA policy team that as of tomorrow morning, we bag #Freeman for PM in response to that third question, assuming, George, you have not grabbed it already. And thank you very, very much indeed for giving us your time, giving us your insight, and for being such a fantastic, fantastic speaker. Thank you very much
Thank you.
indeed.
Thanks.